Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. I've covered some really important topics on this podcast, but this one is arguably the most important. It's about ramen. Okay, I jest. But if you are a listener of this podcast, you have likely noticed I cover lots of important psychological issues that we face, but I also cover huge pleasures. Among those pleasures, some episode topics have included coffee, barbecue, and ice cream. I'm going to add one more. I am utterly in love with ramen. It is my go-to comfort food, and I'm not alone. It has become a huge international sensation, and as you will hear, people where I live in Silicon Valley and all over the world will stand in line for an hour or more just to get a bowl from their favorite shop. In this episode, we discuss the varieties of ramen, why we humans are so drawn to it, its history, some cool activities for parents and children, and so much more. Fortunately, I know just the guy to talk about this phenomenal dish, and his name is Rory Dent. Rory comes from England, but has lived in Japan for many years, both as a student at Musashi University and as an employee, including working as a cook at a ramen shop and currently as a tour guide. Recently, he was my family's tour guide for a spectacular ramen tour in Tokyo, and shortly after we met, I knew I needed to share his brilliance with you, my listener. So listen in as Rory and I talk about the international phenomenon known as ramen. Rory Dent-san, Super Psyched ni irashaimase.
ありがとうございます。こんにちは。デントと申します。
So glad to be with you, man. I cannot believe we are hanging out.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I said in the intro that you are a historian of Japanese society and culture, and you know so much, and you really got into it. And I'm so delighted to be talking with you about shared passion of ours, I can say, one that you know far more than I do about, as evidenced by what you dropped when we actually hung out. And I said to you, in Japan, I need you on the show. It will be a one-off. This is unlike anything I've ever done, except for the fact that I have done one on ice cream, one on barbecue, and one on coffee. So clearly you are following a trend that leads from my heart to my stomach.
I like it. I like a good subgenre. And there's always more to talk about when it comes to food. But indeed, we know what we're here for. And no, thank you. It's very flattering of you to ask me on. Before we even finish the tour, I think it's like halfway through, and you're like, "You're going to have to go on the."
You're in. It was your knowledge base that really I just knew would be so interesting for my listenership. Let's just start with the basics. I'm guessing that anybody listening to this episode knows that ramen is not just cup of noodles or instant ramen that got us through college or kind of leaner days. But let's talk about ramen. What is it? What is ramen?
That's a good question. I mean, arguably, it's one of Japan's national dishes, or at the very least, one of Japan's most iconic dishes. In its raw form, it is a big bowl of noodle soup. That's how I can describe it in as few words as possible. But of course, as we all know, it's a lot more than that. I suppose it's that we can talk about.
Yeah, and I was told that basically there are 3 items that basically are necessary for ramen. It must have broth, noodles, and some type of delicious garments and toppings, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's a dish of 3 parts, and you can't neglect either one of them if you want a truly great bowl of ramen. There is a lot of thought that goes into that. Yeah, indeed. I suppose that's something we should talk about as well, because it's a dish with a fairly large fan base.
Yes.
I would say, yeah, within Japan, culinarily, probably one of, if not the most obsessive fan bases. But I always argue that an obsessive fan base drives quality.
And what's interesting about ramen is that it's not just delicious. I mean, a rather glib answer as to why is it so popular would be, well, it's delicious. I've actually heard a food expert say that.
I mean, sure.
Really satisfy me because people will literally wait in line for well over an hour for ramen. They'll wait in line for well over an hour for my other favorites, barbecue, coffee, and ice cream. I guess that's part of why that has to be part of the quartet, at least for now, of amazing foods. But people will wait in line, as evidenced by us waiting in line for well over an hour, me and my sons, just for a bowl of ramen at 11 p.m. We didn't get until after midnight. And we were totally happy to
It was
pay the
worth
price. Entirely.
That's what I want to hear. It always is. If there's a queue that long, it's going to be. And that's kind of a thing. I've seen an hour plus long queue in 3 foot deep and still falling snow up in Yamagata. And I had eaten there before. So I sort of drove past and did a double take. Like, man, that's insane. Then I caught myself thinking, like, oh, it's quite good ramen though.
There aren't that many foods that people will wait in such a long line for. Excuse me, I'll be Britishly sensitive.
Not at all.
In such a long queue.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I'll try and de-Britishize my English as much as possible as well.
No, we want to get this as cross-cultural as possible.
That helps.
No, I love it. And bust it out. Why do you surmise that people will wait so long for a bowl of something that's ostensibly as simple as ramen, and yet, as dive into, it's not that simple?
No, and that's a good question. Of course, I'd always say take everything I say with a pinch of salt, because everyone's going to have their own answers and assumptions. But for me, a couple of reasons, really. One, it's not just the quality, it's the value. And I think that attracts people to ramen as a dish to begin with, in that it is one of the cheaper dishes in Japan. Japan's a country that has a lot of absolutely amazing food, but you can go and spend $200, $300 a person on like a kaiseki course or a sushi omakase, and it will be amazing. But the average cost of a good bowl of ramen here at current exchange rates, you're looking at like $7.50 US. And that's just insane. It will be one of the best things. You get pound for pound, or dollar for dollar, if you will. I'd say streets ahead of a £500 sushi course, but that's just me. It's also an extremely diverse dish. There is just always more to try. I always say you never have the same bowl twice unless you go back to the same shop and order the same thing. And even then, it depends who's in the kitchen. So with this word of mouth and particular fandom spreading all of these rumors and reviews about this amazing bowl of ramen that you've tried nothing like, people will wait. Also, the Japanese just love a queue. There is that too, or a line. This is why us British get on well in Japan, because we both enjoy a very good queue. I think the equivalent queue length in the US might be shorter because people are less likely to want to queue up, but that's conjecture at that point.
Well, I will disabuse you of that, because in our local mall, there is a ramen nagi operation.
Oh, right.
Just like the one that you took us to. And there is always a queue of well over an hour.
Wow, really?
Yes.
God.
And it's legendary.
People would never queue that long in the UK. People queue for a couple of Indian restaurants, but it's more, I think it's odd that it's become the norm over here for good ramen, or for at least good ramen. Whereas back at home, it's rare that you'd see people queuing that long for any restaurants. It might happen, but it would be a bit of an exception. It'd stand out. Every time I walk past a ramen place that I don't know and I see a queue, I'm taking a picture of that, because I know that's one that's worth adding to my list. Because if people are willing to queue for it, it means it's good, right? There's one around the corner from me up in Adachi here. They vote with their feet and their bellies. Yeah.
So I've got a couple questions for you about this.
Please.
People may believe that ramen is just a simple dish. It doesn't take very long to make because they've made it in their college dorm rooms. It comes out in a few minutes. And yet you and I both know that ramen, when done properly, takes well over 10 hours just to make the broth. You've been behind the scenes. You've sweat in such a place.
Oh, I have.
Let's hear, what does it take to make a bowl of ramen?
That's a great question. And it's funny, people do sort of self-deprecatingly say, oh, I've only ever eaten packaged ramen, cup ramen. I always say, park that aside. That is also nationally beloved as a dish. Considered something different, but there's nothing to be ashamed about for liking cup ramen. It's a great thing. When it comes to real ramen, indeed, I've worked in ramen kitchens, and it's a phenomenally time-consuming dish and a complex dish, and indeed a technical dish. So, as we said, a dish of 3 parts. I mean, if you're setting aside noodles just for the moment, starting with your broth, it's a stock. You're making a stock. And that can take anywhere from 10 to 16 hours, depending on the restaurant. There are many, many different techniques. And like most parts of a bowl of ramen, it's kind of up to the chef. It depends what you want to do. And as long as you can culinarily justify it, it is quite open to interpretation. But you're filling a big pot with bones, with veg. For example, one of the places I worked in had a 65-litre stock pot. Now, you might have to translate that to
65 liters. It's almost 17 gallons.
65 litre
so
in
it's
gallons.
Just 16 point something gallons.
That's 17.17 US liquid gallons.
That is huge.
Well, I tell people, sometimes I have kids on my tour and I'm like, well, you could fit in that. I could have hid you in there. This is an absolute monster. And I tell you what, the energy cost of that thing alone operating was quite mad, but it was a real great piece of kit. We would fill that with bones. Our particular broth was 2 parts pork and 1 part chicken. If you really want to get into the nitty gritty of it, then the question, of course, is, well, what bones? Do you use pork shoulder with a lot of marrow? Do you use rib with less marrow, a bit more flavor to it? I know a lot of places that use pork trotters. We actually use chicken feet for the same reason. They both have a lot of collagen. So when you melt that down, you get a much thicker broth. I've known of restaurants that just chuck in whole chicken wings with the meat on because you get a much thicker broth when it melts down. This is all kind of open to interpretation. When you look at your tonkotsu style, like you mentioned, nagi over in America, and I know a lot of ramen outside of Japan is tonkotsu. That will often be pork, like 100%. But a lot of ramen here, pork and or chicken and anything else really. Vegetables, we had onion, we had garlic, we had kombu. We had mushrooms, shiitake, kombu, yeah, thick, very nice thick seaweed, yeah.
It's kind of what we call it, kind of an umami flavor.
Oh, there we go. Drink every time someone says umami, whenever you're discussing Japanese cuisine.
Yes.
But no, for sure. Same with shiitake mushrooms. This is the kind of thing I get into when I'm really talking nitty-gritty details with people or reading any ramen literature. It is, right, well, where does the kombu come from? Where does the shiitake come from? And that's something people really care about here, that kind of care for provenance of ingredients. Again, for something that's a $7 dish, blows my mind. But you boil all that up. We boiled overnight, and that would have been, a good 14 hours. You would get a spoonful of your tare, which is your seasoning, and that could be a big spoonful of miso-based tincture for a miso ramen, melted down pork lard for a tonkotsu ramen, or some shoyu mixed with oil for a soy sauce ramen. And then you would top that up with a big ladle full of your broth, give that a whisk, and then you have a bowl of soup. In go your noodles, and then on go your toppings. That should all be done and plated up in 10, 15 seconds. As I always say, if you want a very bad review as a ramen chef, you leave that full bowl on the side for a minute before you put it in front of someone, because they will say it's not hot enough and the noodles are soggy, and we hate nothing more than a soggy noodle here in the ramen fandom. But there we go. That's the stock to bowl.
So we got 17 gallons brewing, and about how many bowls do you think that's going to actually serve?
Man, that's a good question.
Hard to know, probably, but just not.
Casting my mind back, I mean, it would do us for an entire afternoon and evening service. And cover. I mean, that's
that
a good couple
of. Last you the whole day. That's pretty impressive.
I don't think we ever ran out. Covers wise, this was a good few hundred bowls of ramen.
Well, let's get into the history of ramen.
Let's.
We can dash that. So somebody that many Americans probably have never heard of is Momofuku Ando.
National treasure, legend.
But we can get into him and maybe a little bit of the history of how this all came about. Let's talk about it.
Well, do you want to start with Ando, or do you want to cast your minds back into
sure.
That's Momofuku Ando. I mean, he's an interesting guy. I really have to sanity check this, but as far as I know, he's actually, strictly speaking, Taiwanese.
Correct.
Born in Taiwan, but grew up and lived most of his life in Japan. But he is considered the father and inventor of Nissin cup ramen, instant ramen noodles. Nissin, as it's spelled, Nissin. That's internationally recognized brand now. So he was a big cheese, a huge guy, and again, nationally quite loved in Japan. He passed away, sadly, 2007 odd, but I believe his process was deep frying the cooked noodles.
You got it.
And then realizing that you could rehydrate them with hot water. And that's the eureka moment that I'd say millions of college and university students and graduates can look back on and thank him for. Because I mean, hey, sure, even as a ramen fanatic and a ramen tour guide, I ate my fair share of cup ramen when I was a student, for sure. He founded Nissin, I believe. So it was his own company. And they're still around today. They're an absolutely huge company.
$7 billion company, huge.
That doesn't surprise me. As I say, setting aside ramen shop ramen, cup ramen is still extremely good. Like anything in Japan, the standards of quality are high. They have constant tie-ins with famous ramen restaurants where they'll release a limited edition run as their recipe that they've signed off on. Whenever you see a Nissin cup ramen with a picture of a serious-looking Japanese guy with his arms folded on the front, that's a famous ramen. I kid you not, I tell people to look at this when they're in 7-Elevens in Japan. You'll find them. They're great. I believe the ramen museum over in Yokohama, which of course exists, that is Nissin. I'm almost certain that is Nissin that run it. So have you been there? Did you guys go?
I haven't, but
you got something to do when you come back.
I'm told it's quite an experience, and
it's quite a lot of delicious
ramen to be ingested at that museum.
Yeah, it's quite good fun. You can make your own bowl. The whole place is done up to look pretty retro, and they've recently put on an exhibition where they've recreated as close as they can get to the first bowl of ramen shop ramen made in Japan, which is a Ramen opened in 1910. They're not there anymore, but they spoke to the great-grandson of the dude who opened the restaurant and a bunch of old fellas that ate there like decades ago. Tell us what it tasted like. And they've now launched like a limited original ramen bowl. Obviously, it tastes super different to like a soy sauce ramen you'd have today, but that's kind of the fun thing about the dish and how much it's evolved over the decades.
And one of the things that you exposed me to and is just the spectacular broad range of what is considered ramen. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, but could you just speak just for a moment about the many shades of ramen?
Sure. I think it is interesting as what we call ramen. I'm not sure if I'd said it on the night, but if I've got British people around, I normally say it's not dissimilar to what we call curry, in that curry is like 50 different dishes back at home. We love our curry back in Britain, but it's a dupiata, it's a rogan josh, it's a biryani, it's a korma, so on and so forth. We just call it all curry. I reckon there's just as much variation in ramen because what you have, and it is a blanket term for me, as long as you have ramen noodles in there, it's ramen, like it or not.
Yes.
Some traditionists don't like that, but what you have is... We'll get onto that, I'm sure. That's the philosophical side of ramen. But you have the big four classic types of ramen. These are considered like the four corners of the ramen map. That is shio, which is salt. That is shoyu, which is soy sauce. And that is tonkotsu, which is pork bone, quite literally, but that's your thick, heavy pork bone broth. And there is miso, fermented soybean paste. That's not exhaustive, of course. I'll often talk about the foundation invention of those over the sort of first half of the 20th century. But it didn't stop there. Ramen's continued to grow since then. So you've got an infinite number of offshoots, experimentations. So changing out the stock to make tori paitan, which is chicken-based ramen. It's not dissimilar to tonkotsu. Adding in interesting new flavors like curry ramen, which is kind of one of the hot things right now. Seasonal variations like your cold yashichuka, so cold ramen for the summertime. And then sort of odd experimental deconstructions on the dish, like your tsukemen dipping noodles with the noodles served separately, or your aburasoba oil-based noodles without a traditional soup. And there's more than that. The possibilities are endless. I often say there's a place that does lamb ramen, which is extremely ambitious here because the Japanese, by and large, really quite dislike lamb. So I've got a lot of respect for that chef for choosing for himself a real struggle. And it just goes on and on from there. It goes on. This is why we don't get bored of the dish. There's thousands of ramen shops in Tokyo alone. And there's always more new wacky stuff to try.
And what's spectacular is there's vegetarian, there's halal, there is gluten-free, there is all types for all types of people. So it's really exciting. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about you being a foreigner, working in a ramen shop. You must have attracted a little bit of attention. You were probably just thinking, hey, I'm just working here. This is my job. But I'm wondering if you could describe a little bit of what that was like behind the front lines of ramen in the real place where it really happens. You were in the big leagues.
That's a good question. I mean, it was difficult at first. I mean, one of the most difficult things about life in Japan as a foreigner, as any foreigner will tell you, is probably the language barrier.
Sure.
The good thing about ramen is that I suppose it is simple in its complexity. A lot of the bits you have to do very quickly and not screw up are actually quite straightforward. It's things like building up the stock that you can do behind the scenes and take ages. So there was difficulty at first, people telling me how to do things and me not understanding, or at least taking a bit longer to understand. But it's a dish that's kind to that, because at least when I was like screwing up the stock, there was time for them to say, no, that's not, no, you've got it entirely wrong, and to sort things out. When it comes to actually plating up the dish, which is what you really don't want to mess up, it is quite a bit more straightforward. But yeah, it was odd being foreign in a majorly Japanese kitchen, but great fun. I think ramen as a dish attracts quite casual people. Yep, stern for sure, but a lot people might have seen films like Jiro Dreams of Sushi, which is a phenomenal documentary. But that's a type of cuisine, and of course, a 3 Michelin star, a level of that cuisine that is famous for its strict approach and meticulous approach to quality. Whereas ramen, I think it is a bit more of the casual end of the scale. So really, it was a lot of laughs as well.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Give one of your most memorable scenes, a moment behind the lines as a ramen chef.
Actually, it's a bad one. One always strikes me as
I already love it.
Oh, it's a rough one. We had like a massive, what we call in the UK, a kettle. I don't mean a kettle for boiling tea, like a big one that holds about 15 odd litres or something.
Vat.
Yeah, like a vat. It was a secondary vat we used for quick access. And one of the ladies in the kitchen, she like turned like knocked the tap clean off the front of it. And so it's not that she like opened the tap, she full on knocked the tap off. So what you then had is 15 liters of basically boiling. I mean like hot enough to cause quite serious injuries.
I would think.
A chicken pork stock spurting out of the front, and with there being no tap on the front, like we couldn't just like, to tell you now, I can't even remember what we did, how we figured it out. I think someone picked the whole thing up and just like hoiked it in the sink. But it was carnage. Like everyone was burning their hands. You would have experienced a room full of Japanese people yelling. It's always good fun. That's something that transcends the language barrier, which is don't need to know the ins and outs of the grammar they're using to assume what they're saying is someone sort that bloody burning soup out, because it's going to cause a lot of injuries. Yeah, that took me by surprise.
That is absolutely outlandish. Let's talk a little bit ramen manners for a moment.
Ramen manners, yeah.
I remember watching Tom Popo, 1990s film, maybe late 80s actually.
I think it's I reckon it's the 80s. Yeah, very young Watanabe Ken. Is it not?
That's right. Yeah. Oh my God, that was him playing the cowboy.
Yeah, it was. That's Watanabe Ken.
Or the guy with the hat. Anyway,
yeah, that's the dude.
I love Watanabe Ken.
Yeah,
so amazing. And most recently in Tokyo Vice, which is just outstanding.
I still not watched it. I've read
it's so good.
I have not had the time.
But I love Watanabe Ken. For many Americans have seen The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. That was also him, and many other great films. He's a phenomenal human being, and just maybe like as close to like the Japanese version of a Clint Eastwood, just a stuff. Anyway, Tom Popo, they were talking about like some of the manners I've come to love. First, you enjoy a little bit of the broth and the noodles and the toppings, and in that order. But I know that's a little bit regimented. But you did share some of the basic ramen etiquette, and I was wondering if you could, including slurping and how long you're allowed to be in your seat. Let's hear about
ramen rules. Let's throw them down. I mean, there's rules and there's suggestions. I'll flag each, because I suppose thinking about when that bowl sits down. I mean, first of all, the rule would be order straight away.
Yeah,
that's one. A lot of places have their old-fashioned ticket vending machine. You put your money in, you press your buttons that you might not be able to read if you're a foreign tourist. Just guess. Press the top left. It's probably the signature. If there are people behind you, take a picture of it, step off to the side and Google Translate if you want. But don't stand in front of the machine holding your phone at it, Google Translate for 10 minutes, because you'll annoy people behind you. But you put your money in, you press what you want, you get your tickets. That's so when you sit down, you order straight away. You don't sit there going and staring at the menu, annoying the chefs. So you order straight away. When the broth turns up, a suggestion would be to take a spoonful of the broth to begin with. Just the broth, the soup, to savor the flavor of what they put together there before you mix it all up. That's kind of, for me, the way to start. Because once you get it all the toppings and any additions, any condiments in there, you change the flavor, but just a nice unadulterated spoonful of soup. Suggestion would be to eat quickly. The Japanese, as I mentioned earlier on, they dislike soggy noodles. So men ga nobichao, the noodles get long. I think you translate nobiru, get long to get tall. What it means is, the noodles soak up the broth. They get swollen, and soggy noodles are gross noodles. So you'll notice this sometimes. You'll sit down. If you're in the habit of eating your food slowly, and you might notice the seat next to you is inhabited like 2 or 3 times as Japanese people sit down, inhale it, and then go. They also like their food really hot. Like really hot. I like it too, but like they like it really, really hot. They take your time if you want, but the Japanese, they'll get straight in there. The slurp or to not slurp, this is a constant conundrum, and I think it gets misrepresented outside of Japan, because I often have people ask me on my tours, Rory, is it true that it's rude to not slurp? I say, no, you got the emphasis wrong there. It's more that it's not rude to slurp. You can slurp if you want. The Japanese will slurp to cool the noodles down, and some will say to aerate the soup in a way not dissimilar to a fine wine. I might raise my eyebrow at that, but it's fun. However, it is not rude to not slurp. A lot of people aren't comfortable with slurping. Indeed, ramen slurping is not spaghetti slurping. If you try and slurp one whole noodle up, you are likely to cause a mess. It's a bit of a chopstick pull up, slurp the slack, reach down, but it's very hard to demonstrate. But I digress. It's not rude to slurp. That's what I mean. Slurp away if you want. You can drink from the bowl. This is one that still divides opinion. Some people say you shouldn't. Some people say go ahead. I tend to say go ahead. I've always drank from the bowl. I've seen Japanese people drink from the bowl. I think it's more a lot of Japanese people won't drink all the soup. Be quite salty, fill you up. The noodles are the main dish, really. The toppings are the accoutrements, and the soup for me is there to bring it all together. But a lot of the time people won't drink it all, so you don't often see people picking up the whole bowl and emptying it. But if you want to, you're all good. Again, that's a suggestion, not a rule. Another rule would be when you're finished, get out. particularly if there's a queue.
Can we actually say piss off as soon as
Yes, get out of here. I might have mentioned some hot ramen news a couple of months ago. It was somewhere down in Shibuya. They banned people from watching YouTube on their phones, which is obviously something people do here. Eating alone is very normalized in Japan, which I also think is great because people are too nervous to eat by themselves in like Britain. Or I don't know about America, but yeah,
That's
a lot of people
a
wouldn't go to to like a restaurant by themselves in London. Looks like your date's not turned up. But here it's cool. So a lot of people end up watching YouTube on their phones. But they say, please don't do that because A, you're not going to enjoy the dish because you're going to let the noodles soak up too much broth. But I think that's the polite carrot to the honest stick of, and also get out because you're holding the queue up. It's considered extremely bad form to hold a queue up, or even just to keep a seat when you're done with it. With ramen being a dish that people will queue for, yeah. You don't sit around talking with your mates. You don't get a bottle of wine in. Talking is an interesting thing too. You often see ramen shops can be very quiet. Just the sound of people slurping. Talking loudly in ramen shops is something that annoys people. It's not restaurants in general. If you go to an izakaya, it's Japanese people drinking and yelling all night long. It's great. Loud atmospheres. But ramen shops, yeah, you don't want to sit there like leaning over, shouting to your friends or your family members. That annoys the locals. But that's more
so euphemistic about the way you just delivered that. Don't let the noodles get soaked up. And the Japanese have a very elegant way of giving a directive in the most kind, maybe euphemistic way, when they're really saying, in the kindest, gentlest way, please piss off.
This is very true. I think this is funny when some people, depending on where you're from, in the States or Europe, some people come here and struggle with how indirect communication can be here in Japan. But actually, a lot of British people kind of get it because we have a very similar kind of thing. Like you see these charts online of for American businessmen, like what the British say versus what they actually mean. And, that's an interesting idea. Actually means that's a really stupid idea. I hate it. Again. But the Japanese, you'll get that here in Japan. Some friend of mine from Kyoto says that a notorious one in Kyoto is when someone wants you to leave, they'll compliment your watch,
which means
that's a really nice watch you've got
watch,
there. Exactly. Yeah. And I was, as a Brit, I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. That's a phenomenal way of telling someone to get out. Got so much time for that.
Yeah. And to a clueless American like me, I could actually look down at my watch and say, oh, thank you so much.
Yes, Rolex.
How great.
Got it years ago, yeah. You never would have even considered that. I think even I might be like, oh, that's a weird thing to compliment. Cheers, it was a birthday present. I might not even pick up on that. That's Kyoto people particularly.
That's brilliant.
High level backhanders. Very, very good there.
Love that, Salty. Well, is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet asked?
I mean, how long's a piece of string? There is always more to talk about. That's the thing. We spoke about the dish itself.
Then I will go into my final question, my good man.
By all means.
Such a blast. Rory, if somebody were to want to increase their love and appreciation for ramen itself, what would be your recommendations in terms of whether it's trying different types or learning more about ramen itself or flying to Japan? What would you recommend?
I mean, it's a difficult one. Mine did immediately go to, well, you're going to have to fly to Japan. But then indeed, the double-edged sword is that you'll learn infinitely more about ramen here, but it might ruin ramen back at home for you. And I know the places in London don't really cut it for me now. But read around the subject. Depends where you are in the world and how far that ramen wave has got up your particular beach. But there will be some reasonably good ramen close enough to where most of you are, hopefully. My advice would be have a look online, see what you can find in terms of branches of actual Japanese restaurants who have come abroad. A lot of places will be Southwestern Japanese companies, not always Southwestern, but primarily, rather than enterprising locals. But on the other hand, don't write off the locals. And there's some amazing fusion ramen to be done. The best way to learn more about the dish is to get out there and eat more of it. Get online and have a look about it. But yeah, ultimately fly to Japan, I'm afraid. I'd love to give your listeners more straightforward and easily achievable advice. But I learned a lot more about the dish when I came here, really.
Well, I'm going to share something with you that I've often told parents who want to bond more with their children. And that is to find a dish that they like and to go on an adventure over the course of, say, 10 weeks, 10 months, whatever. Go to a variety of places, come up with criteria that are meaningful to you, and together rate your dishes and debrief about them afterwards and talk about what you loved and what was maybe missing for you, what you would have liked, what you absolutely adored about it. And I think that it can be a very bonding experience for parents and children to do that because it's like a nice common denominator that nobody really has the upper hand around. And it's just so pleasant. So I think ramen would be the perfect way to go on an adventure with one's child and say, we are going to geek out to ramen. We are going to try 10 places over the next 10 months and really, really give our shared write-ups about what we experienced.
I absolutely love that idea. That's fantastic. I mean, I said at the time, I've got an 11-month-old here, and should not shock you that I am already looking forward to him being old enough for me to be like, right, it is about time for your first bowl of ramen, son. Really get him jumped in. I'm not sure how old one has to be here in Japan, but they get over milestones quite early here. But I am super looking forward to that. Yeah, you've been a very good boy this week. I think it's time for ramen and get him hyped up for it. So indeed, there are thousands of places to choose from here. So yeah, I'll look forward to getting him on his own little personal ramen map.
Well, Rory, this has been a blast. I knew it would be. And just like a bowl of ramen, I've been looking so forward to talking with you. And just so glad that you got to share your enthusiasm and wisdom with my listeners.
No, I'm so pleased to be here. And honestly, it's always an absolute pleasure to hear from anyone that I've guided in any context, let alone saying, please come onto my podcast. So I'm extremely grateful. It's extremely flattering. And as I always say, if you find yourself back in town, you know where to find me.
Sure do. I sure will.
Please do let me know and keep in touch in the meantime. There will be more ramen content to come, I'm sure. But yeah, have a look at my barren Instagram. At some point, I'll get around to posting what I'm actually up to on a day-by-day basis there. So hopefully that'll pique your interest to get back over here at some point. But yeah, no, thank you for the time and for the attention and for your patience, for all of it, really.
Thanks so much, man. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.